With Democrats taking charge of the House of Representatives, some of the more progressive members of Congress are pushing for a vote on Medicare for All legislation. Now, it's abundantly clear that this is legislation that's unlikely to go anywhere, especially considering the fact that Trump's the president and Republicans still control the Senate. But the whole point of this is to place pressure on establishment Democrats and party leaders who have not done nearly enough in securing a single-payer healthcare system for Americans. So supporters say they're going to push for a vote and organize grassroots efforts to pressure Democratic holdouts to sign on to the legislation. Now, some of these Democratic holdouts have released some statements about this, and it gives you an idea of how incredibly pathetic and weak they are. We'll get to that in just a second. But Representative Pramila Jayapal, who's awesome and also the co-chair of the Medicare for All Caucus in the House, told supporters on an organizing call that simply expressing support for the idea is not enough. In fact, she was quoted as saying, "When we have that majority, we need to make sure that we put it to use." Could not agree more.
100% right, go get them.
Now let's talk about some of the more establishment Democrats who are fighting back. Like right now, they're fighting back subtly, but when push comes to shove, they will play dirty tricks to try to prevent this from happening. Now, Congressman Ron Kind said many House Democrats, including members of the leadership, are not on board with the idea of government-run universal health insurance.
Yeah,
but I don't care what they want, okay? What you should be on board for is what the vast majority of Americans want, which is universal health care. Medicare for all, it polls well. The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want and making sure that people who were elected to represent the American people do the right thing. Seems like Ron Kind isn't interested in doing any of that.
Okay, so this is a perfect story for what's wrong with Washington because it has Democratic leadership being feckless and weak and pathetic as usual, and it has the mainstream media, in this case The Hill, reporter Peter Sullivan, with an article that backs up the establishment, gives no facts for the progressives at all, and smears them. Okay, so on Ron Kind, he said, it's not realistic that given that the Republicans control the Senate. Yeah, you know, but you control the House. So instead of going, oh, but the Republicans won't let us, why don't you try? I know for Democratic leadership, that seems like a crazy idea. What you mean, like present our case and fight for it? What? I don't understand what you're saying. Then how would I immediately surrender to the Republicans? Look at that preemptive surrender. Oh, but the Republicans control the House, the Senate. What could I do? I can't do anything. Right. Well, you have a mouth, don't you, Ron Kind? Can't you just also talk and make your case? But you don't want to make the case because you're actually corrupt. And you take money from those same healthcare industries that the Republicans take money from, and then you use the Republicans as an excuse and a shield not to do anything when you control the House. So I want to get to the press in a second.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly add, look, this is when Republicans were attempting to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And I'm not talking about recently, I'm talking about in the beginning when they first started trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. A common criticism that we would hear, not just from left-wing pundits, but also from members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress was, look, they want to repeal it, but they have no other ideas. They have no other plan to take the Affordable Care Act's place. And that was not only a common criticism, that was a valid criticism. The whole point of this Medicare for All proposal and the proposed legislation and vote is about applying pressure to these corporate Democrats. That's part one. But part two is showing that there is a unified effort among Democrats to push for a healthcare system that would actually be successful, that wouldn't just provide access to health insurance, but would provide healthcare coverage to every single American.
They don't want that, they're corrupt. Okay, so I'm going to explain why in a second, but first I want to go to Peter Sullivan wrote this article for The Hill. But look, to be fair to him, almost everybody in mainstream media in Washington writes crap like this, okay? They regurgitate stuff that is fact-free totally right-wing propaganda, and by the way, aided and abetted by Democratic leadership. So then if you ask Peter Sullivan, my guess is he would say, I don't know, the Republicans and Democratic leaders both agreed that Medicare for all is terrible. So I just wrote an article that said they both agreed that it's terrible and that we shouldn't do it. And the progressives are not realistic, they're not pragmatic. So I wrote it down because I'm not a reporter, I'm a stenographer, just like every other reporter in Washington. Anyway, so I'm gonna give you evidence though. He wrote, Republicans use Medicare for all, otherwise known as single payer, as a leading area of attack on Democrats during the 2018 midterm elections. But wait a minute, Peter, don't you wanna point out a couple of things here? Number one, Anna's right when she said, no, they didn't. Democrats used healthcare as their number one issue. The Republicans hid from the issue of healthcare, so that's actually factually totally incorrect. So then number two, if they did use it to try to defeat the Democrats in the House, how'd that turn out? The Democrats have already picked up 34 seats. There's 8 seats still left undecided. They'll likely have about 36 seat pickup, okay? Even if they stayed at 34, that's a gigantic victory for Democrats in the House. So why would you write the sentence saying, well, the Republicans beat up the Democrats over healthcare? Well, they won on healthcare. They just won a huge majority. Why wouldn't you write the polling on it? It's right now, Medicare for all polls is 70%. I don't know, maybe you and your buddies in Washington, since you don't know it, but you hate the left. You're so dismissive of progressives. This article is oozing contempt. So why don't you do your job and find the poll? It's 70% of the country wants Medicare for all, 70%, and you make it seem like it's unrealistic and unpragmatic and as if it was like a winning issue for the Republicans. It's the exact opposite of what's true. Do you know that 52% of Republicans want Medicare for all? No, you don't know that if you read this article because they didn't write it. Another sentence, right after that, same paragraph, he said, the Republicans touted a recent cost estimate by the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, which puts the bill's price tag at $32 trillion over 10 years. Now, there is no mention that that's a Koch-funded study, so that is terribly misleading. And number two, there's no mention of what Medicare for all would save. It makes it seem like, oh, we would keep the healthcare system we have now, and including all of its costs, and then we would add $32 trillion on top. Now, if you know anything at all, Peter Sullivan and The Hill and your editors at The Hill, you know that that's not true. Now you could say, hey, look, Bernie Sanders and progressives say it would save $34 trillion and has to be a cost savings overall of $2 trillion. But we don't believe that because we hate the left and we think it would only save 30 trillion. Whatever your argument is, but you can't pretend, as this article does, that it is $32 trillion on top of the current healthcare system. That is in effect a lie.
That's a common trick. Now, look, I don't know this writer and I don't know his true intentions. It appears that he doesn't have good intentions, but I don't know without a shadow of a doubt.
I don't know and I don't care about his intentions.
But I do want to make sure that and you guys are so smart, you probably already know this, but for anyone who might be joining in for the first time, understand that that is a common trick, a common tactic by people, corporatists, both Democrat and Republican, who do not want a single payer healthcare system. They claim, they make it seem as though, as Cenk perfectly mentioned, that this would cost an additional, $34 trillion, and that is not the case. It would replace the healthcare system that we have right now, which is wasteful, and unfortunately, we pay a lot for in the form of private insurers and in taxes, but unfortunately, we don't get the care that people in European countries get. I mean, look, I mentioned this during a recent debate that I had on Medicare for all, and it's amazing that the very people who keep pushing and lobbying for us to give foreign aid to countries like Israel that offer universal health care will then turn around and say, the US just doesn't have the resources for universal health care, I'm sorry. Okay, well, apparently Israel's able to do it. So why are we giving them money if we don't have the resources to do that for our taxpayers? Now, I'm not making a case against foreign aid. I'm just saying that it's a disingenuous argument when they say we don't have the resources.
Why doesn't a single reporter ever report that the entire rest of the developed world, all of Europe, has single payer? Like somehow it's unrealistic, not pragmatic, but the rest of the world does it. Somehow, what are they, geniuses? Are we stupid? What is it? Anyway, I'm not anywhere near done with the Democrats yet. I almost call them Republicans because in fact, that is really what they are, these Democratic so-called leadership. So Frank Pallone from New Jersey says that we should just shore up the Affordable Care Act. Just get a little bit of change. Because that's what you campaign on, right? Just a tiny little bit of change. No. Blue wave and resistance. Just kidding. So he says, I've always been an advocate for Medicare for all or single payer. Not true, but I just don't think that the votes would be there for that. So I think our priority has to be stabilizing the Affordable Care Act, preventing the sabotage that the Trump administration has initiated. Now, if you really were for Medicare for all, you know, there would be one good way of showing that by voting for it or co-sponsoring it or introducing it. But you're not gonna do any of that. Instead, you shore up the Affordable Care Act. And you know, Medicare for all, I'm theoretically in favor of it. Lie, total lie. He is not a co-sponsor of it. Here's another liar, Richard Neal. And he's the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And all these Democrats have pretty little words like, oh, eventually we'll be in favor of it. But are you co-sponsoring? No. Are you voting yes? No. Are you even allowing a vote? Hey, okay, you don't want to vote for it and you get paid by the healthcare companies to be corrupt, that's your business, not my business. But whether you allow a vote, that's all of our business. So you're telling us that we all voted for you for change, and then you say, no, just kidding. We're not gonna change a goddamn thing. Why? Oh, the Republicans in the Senate, shut up. That's why people don't vote for Democrats, because you guys purposely lose. I got another one, Joe Kennedy. Oh, he's on fire if you go on Facebook. He's paying a lot of ads on Facebook to spread his speeches on the floor of the House. Oh, he's a real fighter. He's into the resistance. And he says he's for Medicare for all too. He says, I'm more than open to the idea of single payer. Well, there'd be a great way to show that. You could vote for it. He also said he's unquestionably a single payer is part of the discussion going forward. Well, really, we're having a discussion. How about a vote on it? Then he said, I think the first step is trying to make sure we maintain the progress that we've had with the Affordable Care Act. In other words, no, I'm not actually in favor of single payer. No, I'm not gonna vote for it. No, I didn't co-sponsor it. No, I don't think we should put it up for a vote. So I got it, Joe. And why do you think Joe Kennedy did the rebuttal for the State of the Union? Because that's what the establishment going, good boy, Joe, good boy, good boy. Why do you take the corrupt money from the healthcare industry and do their bidding? Let's just put a Band-Aid on the Affordable Care Act. Let's not do what 70% of the country wants, over 80% of Democratic voters want, and what they just voted for. Let's not do that. Instead, let's play games. The last one, Nancy Pelosi herself. Pelosi said in June that ideas like Medicare for all, quote, would have to be evaluated in terms of the access that they give, the affordability of it, and how we would pay for it. Oh, thank you, Nancy. Why don't you just repeat a Republican talking point? How are you gonna pay for that? How are you gonna pay for that? Yeah, I got Republicans who say that. We actually know how we're gonna pay for it, and we've said it over and over again. We don't need the Democratic leader to parrot the talking points of the Republican leaders. They're pathetic. They are corrupt, and they were never, ever going to do anything they promised. So that's who Nancy Pelosi is. And likely, the rest of a lot of those corrupt Democrats will probably make her Speaker of the House. So I don't know if I've been clear enough. This is, I know, verboten Washington. Everything I've said here makes heads explode. Oh, Nancy Pelosi, master legislator. Hey, Nancy, I thought you were a master legislator, right? So, Representative Pelosi, this is a perfect opportunity to be a master legislator. You're the one who said it, not me, right? Why don't you pass Medicare for all? Then I will scream from the rooftops that I will turn right around because I care about facts. And I will say Nancy Pelosi is a master legislator. But right now, the master legislator is running for the hills. Going, oh, no. Republicans are right. How are we gonna pay for it? How are we gonna pay for it? The Republicans are right. Oh, what a master legislator. Pathetic. Schumer in the Senate, he gets away with everything. Why isn't his ass on the line too? Let's go. I mean, in the House, they at least have the majority of the Democrats who've co-sponsored it. Schumer, where are you? Where are you? Nowhere.
He's waiting for promises from Mitch McConnell.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure Mitch will want to do this right away.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why people are upset at Democratic leadership. This is why. We knew you weren't going to do it. Okay, so I'm glad that the monsters that are the Republicans are not in charge. But I can't wait to primary every one of these people and drive them out of Washington and get real people who are gonna actually do what they promised and deliver on healthcare for everyone in the country. So that if a child gets sick in this country, we are not going to let them die. Young Turks. Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.